The world was a blur of gray sky and shrieking metal. Eleanor Vance, CEO of a Titan tech firm, gripped the plush leather arms of her seat, her knuckles white. The Gulfstream G650, her skybound boardroom and sanctuary, was bucking like a wild animal. Below, the patchwork of some forgotten slice of America rushed up to meet them. "What's happening?" she demanded, her voice tight with a control she didn't feel. The pilot's voice, strained over the intercom, was grim. "Engine failure, Ms. Vance. We're making an emergency landing at a regional airstrip. Brace for impact." Impact. The word was an insult to her meticulously ordered life. Eleanor's world didn't have impacts. It had projections, strategies, and controlled outcomes. But as the small jet slammed onto a tarmac with a bone-jarring shudder, skidding sideways in a spray of gravel, she understood that control was an illusion. The silence that followed the engine's death rattle was more terrifying than the noise. She was stranded, a queen without her kingdom, in a place that looked like it had been misplaced by time. A man in grease-stained overalls was the first to approach the wounded aircraft. He moved with a calm, unhurried gait that infuriated her. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't even rushing. Behind him, a small girl with wide, solemn eyes and two neat braids clutched his hand. "Ma'am, you all right in there?" His voice was a low, steady baritone that cut through the ringing in her ears. Eleanor smoothed her silk blouse, a pointless gesture of reclaiming authority. "We're fine. I need to arrange for immediate transport, and I need a full diagnostic on this aircraft. Now." The man simply nodded, his gaze sweeping over the damaged engine with an expert's eye. "Transport might take a while out here. Diagnostic I can do." He looked down at the little girl. "Lily, why don't you go sit on the bench?" "I'll be right there." The girl gave a small, silent nod and went to a weathered wooden bench near a hangar, her serious eyes never leaving Eleanor. He was all quiet competence, a stark contrast to the frantic energy that usually surrounded her. Why was he so calm? And why, in the wreckage of her perfectly planned day, did she find the sight of him and his silent daughter so utterly captivating? The airstrip's office was a single room that smelled of stale coffee and machine oil. Eleanor's phone had no service. The landline on the desk looked like a museum piece. For the first time in a decade, she was completely disconnected, adrift in a sea of analog stillness. The man, Samuel Jones, had introduced himself before disappearing into the guts of her jet. His daughter, Lily, sat on the bench outside, drawing in a sketchbook with intense concentration. Eleanor paced the small room, the click of her heels an aggressive intrusion on the quiet. This was a disaster. A billion-dollar merger was hanging in the balance, and she was stuck in the middle of nowhere. She needed to project strength, to be the unshakable Eleanor Vance her board and competitors knew. But inside, a cold fear, one she hadn't felt in years, was beginning to bloom. It was the fear of helplessness. An hour later, Samuel returned, wiping his hands on a rag. "The turbines sheared. Looks like a manufacturing defect." "You were lucky." "Lucky?" she scoffed. "I'm stranded." "You're alive," he countered, his tone even, without judgment. "That's the luckiest kind of stranded there is." He met her gaze, and for a second, she saw a weariness in his eyes that went beyond a long day's work. "Parts not common. Have to order it from the city. Might be 2, 3 days." 3 days. The words landed like a death sentence. "Unacceptable. I'll charter a helicopter." He gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Weather's turning. Big storm rolling in off the plains. Nothing's flying in or out of here until it passes." He gestured toward the single, dusty window, where the sky was indeed darkening to a bruised purple. "There's a motel in town. I can give you a ride." Defeated, Eleanor finally nodded. As they walked to his old, dented pickup truck, Lily fell into step beside her father, slipping her small hand back into his. The little girl looked up at Eleanor, her expression unreadable, and held up her sketchbook. On the page was a surprisingly detailed drawing of the broken jet, but with birds flying peacefully from the damaged engine. soaring into the sky. Eleanor stared at it, a strange tightness in her chest. This quiet man and his silent child were offering a kindness she didn't know how to accept. They saw a broken thing and imagined it freeing something beautiful. All she saw was a problem that was costing her millions by the minute. The town's only motel was as bleak as she'd expected. As Samuel dropped her off, a wave of profound loneliness washed over her. She was used to solitude, had cultivated it as a shield. Her penthouse apartment in the city was a sterile, minimalist fortress designed to keep the world out. But this was different. This was isolation. "Listen," she said, the words sounding foreign and clumsy. "Thank you." Samuel just nodded. "Get some rest. I'll call you in the morning with an update." He started to turn, but hesitated. "My daughter, she doesn't talk much. Hasn't for a while. But she likes you." The drawing was her way of saying she's glad you're safe. Before Eleanor could process this, they were gone, the red taillights of the truck disappearing into the growing dusk. Alone in the drab motel room, Eleanor thought of the drawing. It was a gesture of pure, uncomplicated empathy. It was a language she had long forgotten how to speak. The next day, the storm broke with a vengeance, trapping Eleanor in her room. Samuel called as promised. The part had been ordered, but the roads were flooded. It would be another day, maybe more. "I'm going crazy in this room," she admitted, the confession slipping out before she could stop it. There was a pause on the line. "The hanger's dry," he offered. "Got a working coffee pot. And Lily's here. You're welcome to wait with us." She found herself agreeing without a second thought. The hangar, which had seemed so grim the day before, felt like a sanctuary now. It was vast and orderly, filled with the comforting smell of oil and metal. In one corner, Samuel had set up a small workshop, cluttered with tools and half-finished projects. Lily sat at a small table, meticulously organizing a box of colorful beads. When Eleanor entered, the little girl looked up and gave her a small, shy smile. Eleanor watched Samuel work on a complex piece of machinery from another plane. His hands moved with a dancer's grace and a surgeon's precision. He was completely absorbed, a man at peace with his purpose. "What is that?" she asked, pulling up a stool. "It's a Euro-stabilizer from an old crop duster," he said without looking up. "The owner said it was junk, but the craftsmanship is incredible. They don't make them like this anymore. Just needs patience." He pointed with a screwdriver. "See that gear? It's worn, but the housing is solid. You don't throw away the whole clock just because one gear is stripped." The analogy hung in the air between them. He was talking about more than just machines. She thought of her own life, of the people she had discarded for being inefficient, for not meeting her exacting standards. She thought of the man who had betrayed her, leaving her to believe that all relationships were transactional and all people were replaceable parts. "My ex-fiancé Marcus," she began, the words coming out in a rush, surprising them both. "He was also my business partner. He told me he loved me, that we were building an empire together. Then I found out he was selling our proprietary code to a competitor. He leveraged his knowledge of my company to try and destroy it. He said it wasn't personal, just business." Samuel finally stopped his work and looked at her, his expression full of a deep, quiet understanding. He didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. He just listened. "I won," she continued, her voice hardening. "I crushed his new company. I ruined him financially, and I swore I would never trust anyone like that again. I built walls so high no one could ever get close enough to hurt me." "Walls keep you safe," Samuel said softly, turning back to the delicate mechanism in his hands. "But they're also a prison. You can't see the sky from the bottom of a well." Later that afternoon, as the rain hammered on the hangar's tin roof, Lily approached Eleanor, holding out a small, intricate bracelet made from the beads she'd been sorting. It was a mix of gray, silver, and a single, brilliant blue bead in the center. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. She slid the simple gift onto her wrist, next to a watch that cost more than Samuel's truck. The bracelet felt infinitely more valuable. She looked at Lily, who was watching her with an expectant hope in her dark eyes. And for the first time since the crash, Eleanor truly smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was real. The part for the jet arrived on the third day. Samuel worked with a singular focus, the hangar filled with the sounds of his meticulous labor. Eleanor found she didn't want to leave. She had spent the last 2 days in his world, a world of patience, repair, and quiet dedication. She'd shared meals with him and Lily, packed into the small, warm kitchen of his home, which was filled with the scent of sawdust and baking bread. It was cluttered and lived in, the polar opposite of her own stark apartment. Felt more real than any place she had ever been. Lily had started taking her hand, leading her to see a spiderweb glistening with rain or a bird's nest tucked in the rafters. The child's silent companionship was a balm to her soul. Eleanor learned about Samuel's late wife, a schoolteacher who had loved books and stargazing, taken by a sudden illness 4 years ago. He spoke of her with a gentle sadness that was devoid of self-pity. Lily stopped talking a few months after her mom passed, he explained one evening, his voice low as they sat on his porch, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance. The doctors said it was trauma, that she'd speak again when she felt safe enough. He looked over at his daughter, who was asleep on the porch swing, her head in Eleanor's lap. She feels safe with you. The words struck Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. Safety was something she took from others, a commodity she acquired. It was not something she provided. Yet here was the proof, sleeping soundly in her lap. A profound shift was occurring within her, a tectonic realignment of her soul's foundation. The empire she had built felt cold and distant, a monument to a lonely queen. The small, fragile kingdom of two felt like home. Just as Samuel was finishing the repairs, a sleek black town car, impossibly out of place, pulled up to the hangar. The man who stepped out was handsome, impeccably dressed, and radiated an aura of predatory charisma. Marcus Thorne. Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Eleanor, darling," Marcus said, his smile a flash of white teeth that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard you had a little trouble. I was worried." "What are you doing here, Marcus?" she asked, her voice flat and hard. "Networking, of course," he gestured vaguely at the surrounding land. "My consortium is buying up this entire area. We're putting in a state-of-the-art, fully automated cargo hub. Progress, you know." He glanced at Samuel, dismissing him with a look. "We'll be clearing out these old relics. But I came to make you an offer." Samuel had stopped working, his posture tense. Lily, sensing the shift in atmosphere, moved to stand behind her father, her small hand gripping his jeans. "I'm not interested," Eleanor said. "Oh, I think you will be," Marcus purred, stepping closer. "The final vote on the AeroCorp merger is tomorrow. I've acquired a significant block of shares through a proxy. Enough to swing the vote. I can make it go your way, or I can blow the entire deal sky high. Your legacy, Eleanor. All I ask is for your public endorsement of my new development project here. A small price to pay for everything you've ever wanted." The threat was clear. Endorse his project, which meant endorsing the destruction of Samuel's home and livelihood, and she would secure her empire. Refuse, and he would burn it all to the ground. He was forcing her to choose between the woman she was and the woman she was becoming. Eleanor looked at Samuel, who stood with quiet dignity, his hand resting protectively on his daughter's shoulder. She saw his workshop, the place where broken things were made whole again. She saw Lily's drawing of the birds escaping the wreckage. She looked down at the simple beaded bracelet on her wrist. Everything she'd ever wanted. Marcus was wrong. What she wanted wasn't a bigger company or a more ruthless reputation. What she wanted was this feeling of rightness, of connection, of home. The crisis churned within her for the rest of the day. Marcus had given her until morning to decide, leaving his number with a smug certainty that she would make the smart choice. That night she couldn't sleep. The sterile comfort of the motel room felt like a cage. She thought of her life before the crash. A series of boardrooms, contracts, and empty victories. She had been running a race with no finish line, accumulating trophies for a house with no one in it. She remembered Samuel's words. You don't throw away the whole clock just because one gear is stripped. Her life wasn't broken. Just one crucial part was worn down. Her heart. For years, she had operated as if it were a liability, a piece of faulty machinery to be ignored and suppressed. But here, in this forgotten place, it had started ticking again, quietly at first, then with a steady, insistent rhythm. She thought of Lily. The child had seen through her armor from the very first moment, not with words, but with a gaze that held a universe of understanding. Giving Lily a safe world to speak in was a legacy far greater than any merger. Her choice became clear. It wasn't even a choice. It was an inevitability, the only path forward that didn't lead back to the gilded prison she had built for herself. It was terrifying. She stood to lose everything she had spent her life building. But the thought of losing Samuel and Lily, of betraying the fragile trust they had placed in her, was infinitely worse. For the first time, the potential loss of money and status felt insignificant compared to the potential loss of human connection. The wounded executive was finally ready to heal. The next morning, Eleanor found Samuel in the hangar, putting the final touches on her jet. The engine gleamed whole and powerful once more. It's done, he said, his voice neutral, though she could see the tension in his shoulders. He knew what was at stake. So am I, she replied, her voice steady and clear. She pulled out her phone, which now had a single bar of service, and dialed. Marcus answered on the first ring. Eleanor, I trust you've come to your senses. I have, Marcus, she said, her voice ringing with newfound strength in the cavernous space. Samuel stopped his work to listen. I'm calling to inform you that Vance Industries will not be endorsing your project. In fact, we will be actively opposing it. I'm redirecting our entire philanthropic fund to provide legal and financial support to the landowners and small business owners you're trying to displace. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Are you insane? Marcus finally sputtered. I'll destroy you. The AeroCorp deal is dead. Deals come and go, Eleanor said, a ghost of a smile on her lips. But integrity, once you sell it, you can never buy it back. I'm investing in people, Marcus. Specifically, I'm investing here. She looked directly at Samuel. I'm moving a research and development division of my company to this town. We're going to partner with this airfield, build a center for specialized mechanical engineering. We need a genius to run it. Someone who knows you don't throw away the whole clock. Samuel's eyes widened, a slow dawn of understanding breaking across his face. You'll be ruined, Marcus shrieked through the phone. No, Marcus, Eleanor said softly, and with complete certainty. I'm finally saved. She hung up the phone, the click echoing with finality. The silence that followed was broken by a tiny, clear voice. You fixed it. Eleanor and Samuel both turned. Lily was standing there, looking not at the jet, but at Eleanor. A brilliant, radiant smile transformed her small face. You fixed it, she said again, her voice a little rusty but full of wonder. She ran to Eleanor and wrapped her arms around her legs in a fierce hug. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she knelt and hugged the little girl back. She looked up at Samuel over Lily's shoulder, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. He reached out and placed his hand over hers, his calloused fingers covering the beaded bracelet. In that moment, surrounded by the smell of oil and the promise of a new beginning, Eleanor Vance knew she hadn't lost an empire. She had gained a universe. 1 year later, the Vance Aviation Innovation Center was a bustling hub of activity. The old hangar was the heart of the new campus, preserved and restored. It was a place where old-world craftsmanship met new-world technology, run by its new director, Samuel Jones. Small businesses in the town were thriving, buoyed by the influx of jobs and investment. Eleanor stood on the porch of the farmhouse she now shared with Samuel and Lily, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery strokes of orange and pink. Her life was no longer a series of meetings in sterile glass towers, but a rhythm of school runs, shared dinners, and quiet evenings spent watching the stars. She still ran her company more successfully than ever, but she did it from an office with a window that overlooked rolling hills instead of a concrete jungle. Lily, a chatterbox now, ran across the lawn, her laughter carrying on the warm evening breeze. She was chasing a firefly, her hands cupped to catch its gentle light. Samuel came up behind Eleanor, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Look at that," he said, his voice a low, contented rumble in her ear. "She's trying to catch lightning in a jar." "She already did," Eleanor replied, leaning back into his embrace. She thought of the day her jet had fallen from the sky, a catastrophic failure that had felt like the end of the world. She realized now that it wasn't a crash at all. It was a landing. She had to fall from that great, lonely height to finally touch the ground, to find a place where a broken clock was worth saving, where a silent child could find her voice, and where a wounded heart could finally, truly, be made whole. This was her legacy. Not the company she had built, but the family she had found. It was a quiet, unshakable empire of the heart.